Many thanks to Commissioner Bai for being here. It's been a little while since we've seen you, so we're really delighted that you're here. My name is Mary Oster. I'm the co-chair of the Connecticut Early Childhood Alliance. I apologize for the snowplows in the background. We're on a busy corner here. So I'm going to turn it over to co-chair Jade Thomas to go over our agenda for today.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Mary. Hi, my name is Jade Thomas. I work as a policy specialist at All Our Kin, and I'm also the co-chair of the Connecticut Early Childhood Alliance. To quickly review today's agenda, we're excited to have Office of Early Childhood Commissioner Beth here with us this morning to share more about the governor's proposal to improve families' access to pre-K and preschool. After we have a chance to hear from the commissioner, Meryl will provide several legislative updates. Then Mary will share a few announcements. As always, we'll open up the floor for discussion and announcements from the group, and then we'll close out. And with that, I think I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Commissioner Bai.
Well, thank you so much, Jade and Mary and Meryl and everyone. And I'm joined by Elena Trueworthy, who um, has been working on this proposal really hard as well, and some other members of that team in case there's specific questions that some of them can answer. This has been a real team approach. I think I was thinking about, 300 people are on the call, and all 300 of you are part of the reason why Governor Lamont has come to understand how important early childhood is, and even in challenging fiscal times has made this a priority, and not just a budget priority, but a long-term priority by setting up a trust fund. And I know that some of you worked on that a couple of years ago, getting a trust fund set up as a way to say we want to have early childhood be something that's sustained and not subject to the whims year to year, but something that our state makes a long-term investment in. And the governor is announced yesterday, which I'm sure many of you saw, that this year and next year it would be putting $300 million into a trust fund of state dollars. And in the years thereafter, that fund would continue to grow to fund preschool for all, or UPK, however you want to call it. I think the other thing in terms of your time and energy is that he's really building on the Blue Ribbon Panel plan. That was a plan informed by the community. Many, many hearings, many of you were out there. And I think he really came to understand how important it was that we had a mixed delivery system in Connecticut. I think in other states, governors have been tempted by a brand new program, keep that program simple, and we'll do this and we'll get every 4-year-old preschool. But that was not our approach, and I think it's more complex to explain, as you'll see today. But I think that when a plan is informed by so many people, it is complex because it takes into account the complexities of the system or non-system. So what we're going to be describing to you is the governor's universal preschool proposal. And we also really looking forward to your questions. We have had a chance to sort of pressure test. We met with some large program directors. We met with some school readiness council leaders, and we met with family child care networks. So we've done our best to pressure test this before it came out 100%, but that doesn't mean it's 100% correct. We believe it's a really strong proposal, but we're going to be taking your questions and listening as well. Okay, so I'll start with the problem, and then Elaine and I are going to go back and forth a little bit. You're not someone we have to explain the problem to, and I'm not going to read a PowerPoint slide, but I hope you'll read along while I'm talking. I think the problem the governor saw through COVID was without preschool, public school, childcare open, it's really hard for parents to work. And I think some of the challenges with COVID exposed sort of the non-system and concerns that there were a lot of families that just couldn't afford high quality early childhood and thus couldn't access the workforce. That was part of his challenge. And we have been saying really since 1996, and the advocates on the line who worked on school readiness with me way back then, I think the legislature was really convinced that you need preschool to be ready for kindergarten. And we also want kindergarten to be ready for preschoolers as well as they come in. So we know it's a two-way street, but the governor, in talking to teachers, has really been convinced that preschool is important because those kindergarten teachers tell him, I can tell, and any of you have been at one of his press conferences, he always tells the story, I can tell the kids who've had preschool. The other thing that came just screaming and yelling at us during the Blue Ribbon panel was the parents of children with special needs, that the way that special education is delivered, but for 3 and 4-year-olds, it's really hard for parents and children to have a schedule that makes sense for the family because services are delivered in part week, part day programs, and kids are being transported all over the place, sometimes in different communities. So we heard that as a problem. So, and also it's just sort of idiosyncratic how families find preschool. I was meeting with the program director from Bloomfield who had a parent enroll in their state-funded center, and they'd been paying full fare somewhere. They had no idea there were state-funded spaces or that there were subsidized spaces, and they qualified easily. And this is saving them now thousands of dollars a year, tens of thousands a year to be able to be in a subsidized space. So, it's not equitable. We have about 600 different programs recruiting families. So we need a system that makes sense and where parents know how to access care and access subsidized care if they qualify. So those are sort of the high level problems. Okay, Elena.
Thank you, Commissioner. So, also a lot of what we heard during the listening sessions and working with parents and families across the state is that the system is confusing, right, for parents. And so there's continues to be, right, different eligibility requirements depending upon the programs that parents and families are looking to access, different fee structures, and also continues to be unaffordable for most families, those high costs, and really depends upon what program you're trying to access and where. And those are some big messages that we heard from families and heard from parents. So as we continue to work through, right, this proposal, it's really making sure that parents and families continue to be at the center of this work and to focus on specific populations, including children with disabilities and the additional barriers that have been reported by families looking to find services and supports for their children with disabilities. Next slide. Also, many times access and eligibility depends upon where you live, right? Geographically across our state. We have a small state, but it looks very different. And we hear this from families around, looking at the programs and where they're offered, right? CDC is available in 41 towns, Smart Start, 22 towns. You have public schools, right, that have to offer some services around Part B 619 for all families and children, and then school readiness and Head Start. So as we looked at the data across our state, right, there are 85 towns who do not have any of these state-funded services and supports. And so access to affordable preschool, we found, is largely dependent upon where you live. So, with a lot of how our agency looks and works when doing some big systems thinking, right? Guiding principles are really important, right? What are some of our North Stars? What are some of the principles in which we and everyone that we've heard from the field have told us are really important? So see, these are some of the ones, and we'd love to have your feedback. Are there ones that are missing, right? Are there things that we need to all be thinking about that aren't listed here as a guiding principle? But, knowing that mixed delivery is really important to our state, right? Having parents and families have the choices and resources available in childcare centers, group homes, family childcare homes, and the public schools. We've been working closely with the State Department of Education around this proposal and the future potential steps to be taken. In addition, some guiding principles around quality, knowing that increasing access is not just about increasing access, quality needs to be matched and moving right alongside there. So a continued focus on high quality early care and education. We've learned from other states, and we have some slides a little bit later on around what some lessons learned from other states. But ensuring that as preschool expansion occurs, that we are looking at and holding harmless the infants and toddler system, right? That the infant and toddler care system continues to be supported as some of these expansions happen. Workforce, blue ribbon panel. Workforce was right at the front and center, and we heard that very strong. And so workforce compensation and staff supports. And I think as you'll hear as we continue to go through the slides, but allowing time for that community planning and a focus and strength around the local governance system, but having time to really plan and understand how to roll out in the best way our expansion, and parents having feedback along with providers, right? That continuous feedback loop. What is working? What's not? How do we continue to improve? And what do we need to be thinking about?
Yeah, and I think it's a big undertaking the way we're thinking about it in Connecticut when Elena talks about that community planning. We've had feedback, but we're going to need ongoing feedback about the kind of supports your communities need for highly functioning governance bodies that can do the community assessment and community needs. I know Elena and team have done a lot of thinking about this, the ECE team, Kim and Deb as well. But and we really that's an area where we really want to be a model for the country about having parents at the table, programs at the table, public schools at the table, and coming up with a high quality community plan where power is shared in that process. Because one of the strengths of school readiness is, I think, that part of our system was that there were local councils. One of the weaknesses was I don't think we ever provided the appropriate amount of funding and support so that they could be more functional and independent. So I think we want to improve upon that, and you all are going to be able to help us do that. So I just wanted to, because this is Elena, this group is thinking about those kind of issues. I just wanted to say we're open to your feedback about how to do that well. And we've left ourselves time to plan with you in a very iterative way, because this will all really launch in 2028. So what we're calling this Early Start Connecticut, because it really is part of the Blue Ribbon Panel plan. It really is building on a plan that was in place already. There's obviously more resources and more funds, so we'll talk about how we're going to use those. But there will be affordable or free preschool for families. We want to improve the way that families learn about and enroll in programs. We think this will help us build a better data system. And then it says creates 20,000 new or extended day preschool spaces. I know that was confusing to some people. So the plan is by 2032, there'll be a little more than 13,000 new preschool spaces funded by the trust fund and about 7,000 spaces that are currently part day, part week, special education, or just part day, part week in communities will move to school day, school year. So that impacts 20,000 children and their families. And in addition, there are currently 19,000 preschool spaces where parents have their children that are subsidized spaces. Those spaces, their costs will go down. So we also are working to strengthen the whole birth to five system. Just to be explicit, Elena talked about making sure that they move along with the preschool spaces, is that as the rates for preschool go up, the rates for infant toddler will go up proportionally as well. We met in some early meetings. A program director said, if I get paid that much more for preschool, or preschools are paying that much more, then all the infant toddler teachers will just go teach preschool. Like, we've got to make sure that we value the profession from infant and toddler through preschool, and that the whole state funded system moves along with that. So other states had problems when they just did preschool and didn't consider this. So the trust fund does allow for some of the funds to be used for infant toddler rate parity. And then it's the idea here is, as you move part day spaces to school day spaces, as you add 13,000 new spaces, more families will be able to work and join the economy. And families working means they have more stability. And we just know the impact of poverty and financial strain on families and children's well-being. So it's not just about money, because having financial stability, we know, really helps families. Next slide. Okay, this is a few more details. The idea here is to make the system more affordable, accessible, and higher quality. So families will have preschool options that are free for families making up to $100,000 a year. So for those of you currently running state-funded programs, any family that was making $100,000 per year or less starting in 2028 would have no copay. And for families that make between $100,000 and $150,000 a year, they would be paying a maximum of $20 a day. The reason that says maximum is there could be programs or schools that don't want to charge. So they don't have to charge, but the system is relying on that parent copay for programs. If programs want to eat that and not charge that, they're allowed to do that. We're not going to have a strict requirement around that, or that's not the plan right now. We talked about the trust fund approach. What this is it's not brand new. It's layering on top of what exists. So we basically took, how many spaces do we have now in public schools, in state-funded programs, in Head Start, and what will it take to get enough for everyone to be able to have accessible, affordable programs? So it's taking the current system and extending the length of the day for part day, part year, and the funding will be focused on the way it was priced out with school day, school year spaces. And then there will also be other blocks, before and after blocks. So programs, if you're full day, full year, can apply to be full day, full year. We'll just put those blocks together, because a community plan will be telling us, in this community, we need 75% full day, full year, 25% school day, school year. And, the RFP will respond to local community plans. So I'm probably getting too detailed now, but anyway, we're building on what exists, and communities will be saying, we have this, but we need that. And then those parts will be funded. By 2028, we'll be launching a parent portal where parents can go online and look up, here, I'm a parent, I need 30 hours a week of childcare. I have a 3-year-old and a 4.5-year-old, and my income is this, and up will come, okay, you can have a subsidized Head Start spot, a subsidized early start spot, or a public school spot. The parents will be able to see what's available in their community or in the community where they work. We're going to be a little less community bound here than we have been in the past. So that parent portal, we think, is a big part of this system. They're doing this in Colorado, in Washington, D.C., and South Carolina, and parents just have much more vision into what exists and what they qualify for. And we believe it's going to improve the whole system with funding for some workforce development, quality supports, and then those funds to make sure we don't hurt the babies, that those infant toddler spaces. Elena, do you want to chime in now? You next?
Next slide, sure. Dig in a little bit deeper to the parent portal. So the idea here is to continue to address and improve the family experience, right? The experience of searching for early care and education opportunities, to understand what's available, point in time, to be able to connect and react to what the families need and want. I think an important piece here and how we're thinking about it is both from a technology standpoint, so having technology available for families who choose to, look online, use a mobile app, for example, but also a human-centered approach, right? And we have some great work happening across the state around parent leadership, parent ambassadors, parent-to-parent messaging that's happening. Down on the ground with communities. And we know that parents trust, right, other parents when seeking supports and information about services available for their children and families. And so what you see here is a simple picture, right, of how we're thinking about it, but that families are really able to express what they need and want through an assessment. They can go onto a portal, they can search and have real-time information readily available to them. They can have provider support, right, that human touch, to be able to help navigate the systems and be able to have one point of an enrollment process that is simple, streamlined, and gets them the information and where they want their children to be as quickly as possible.
And we just think this is like, imagine the data that we'll have. So your community, say you're in Stamford, you'll be able to see, not with personally identifying information, but you'll be able to see this many parents went to the portal and this many asked for extended daycare and this many asked for, infant toddler care and this many were looking for school year and this many were looking for full year. So we think that the data will really help with community planning because we're really lucky to have parents at the table and we have a parent cabinet. But like sometimes the actual data about the pathway parents are choosing might give us better information. Okay, next slide. So this is what it looks like over time in terms of preschool access. So the orange is school districts and also Smart Start, which we fund, but it's the vast majority that are children enrolled in public school preschool. And then the maroon is OEC programs and federal funding. The blue that you see in the middle, those are new Smart Start spaces, which are spaces that are funded half by OEC and half by the public schools. The green are the new spaces being added, they're new spaces in that for years we've been lapsing millions of dollars because not all the spaces are used. But this year, as you know, through a process, we have been trying to reallocate those unused spaces, which is actually giving 1,000 more children preschool. This is just preschool. There are also many infants and toddlers, but these numbers are all around 3, 4, and young 5-year-olds right now. So over time, you can see 2028 is when the RFP will begin. And then as the trust fund gets bigger and bigger, then it can support more and more children. And so Elena talked about the importance of having time to plan. This gives communities time, and there's funding for infrastructure dollars, so you have time to build extra space, improve space. Schools, if they're adding on, have a chance to apply for school construction dollars. Childcare programs have a chance to apply for funding to add a classroom. And so this gets to 92% of the need by 2032. I think they define universal preschool as 75% access. I'm going to ask Kristen if that's the right number. I know you're the one who told me that number. They consider that universal preschool.
That's correct.
75%? Okay.
Yep, based on the research that we've done so far. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So this would be well above that. There are always going to be families that don't enroll their 3-year-old in preschool or pick a private school that's not part of the system. You know, that we're never going to have 100%. But this will really make preschool affordable and accessible to way more families. And there was no way to represent in this chart those 7,500 children who are now in part week, part day, special ed preschool or other part day preschool classrooms. But so they will also, even though they don't make the number go higher, what the children are getting is a school day, school year program from a part day, part year program. So those are also included in here, both in the OEC, the Smart Start, and the public school spaces. Okay, next slide. This was just, we thought this was an interesting study to share with you. Some of you may have seen this. And I think some of this is really what moves Governor Lamont is he's just seen that childcare and preschool have such a duplicative effect for Connecticut between helping families, helping children be ready for school, and helping the economy. And this study where children were randomly assigned to get full-day preschool or not get subsidized full-day preschool, so pay themselves, parents were keeping an extra almost $12,000 in their pocket. And when you think about $12,000 a year for a family with children, that's a real game changer for home ownership, for paying off loans, for just being able to breathe a little easier and spend a little more time with your children when maybe not pick up that other job. I know when my children were young, I always had a second job till they were like 7. And that's a strain on a family. I worked in childcare before I was commissioner. So it is a big strain on families. And that, this study just says this is one of the best investments you can make. Okay, next. Just more research that we brought to Governor Lamont to say when you look at states that have done this, there have been really positive impacts. This was moving. Governors want to know what's happening in other states and cities. And I know I've been there when some of you have met with the governor to tell him this is happening there and they're doing a better job in Massachusetts of this. And he really wants Connecticut to be a beacon, to be a place where families and children can access high quality education, starting with universal nurse home visiting right through college. This was important research for him. Next slide. So this just shows we sort of, and I should really take a minute to thank Jen Gerber from Social Impact Partners and that team, and Mark Argosh for spending a lot of time with us over the past really 3 years on these proposals and helping with some of the research. But when you do that research and you look at what's worked and not worked in other states, we made a summary for the governor about what we learned when we did a landscape of other states. Many, many states have very short hours that they pay for. Like Vermont, I think, is 10 hours a week, and they call that universal preschool. So this program is different in that it's 30 plus hours per week and 3s and 4s. Other states just do 4s, but the research is you really need to start with 3-year-olds. And having been a director and teacher for many years, I used to say, give me any 3-year-old, we can bring them into the fold and, get them at circle and participating and learning how to move through centers. But sometimes I'd get a 4.5-year-old who had nothing, and it was just a whole different ballgame. We know that those executive function skills start at birth, but that the longer you wait for children to get in a high quality program, the harder it is for that child to take advantage of all that high quality program is offering. So we really pressed on 3s and 4s. When the costs started coming out, it was like, maybe we could just do 4s, but we just didn't believe the science supported that. So this is 3s and 4s. That even though it's a universal preschool proposal, it does allow for funding to keep infant and toddler rates increasing along with preschool. States have said we're doing UPK, and then the next budget year they're not because there's no money. So the trust fund really allows for that sustainability. The other thing there's a commitment to is the rates and using the trust fund, not just to expand access, but also as the trust fund kicks in, the rates go up significantly to support paying teachers at the rate of kindergarten teachers. The fairness is going to be what I talked about before, that we get the right people at the table, that we support communities with fair decision-making processes, and we think that local planning and local leadership is going to be critical for the system to work. I talked about the enrollment, I talked about facilities, and then we talked about the public-private approach. And I want to say explicitly that over the past few years, we have engaged family childcare providers in our state-funded system, which had never happened before. And this has been a really big success. And Governor Lamont's a big supporter that family childcare will be a part of the universal preschool system. And so our private childcare programs, private preschool programs, and public schools. But I will say I've been so happy with how it's worked out with us being able to have family childcare programs as state-funded providers, and we're continuing that with the RFA that we're doing now. And that's really a value that we have in Connecticut. And there have been great advocates for family childcare. And really, the providers themselves are incredibly, I don't know what the word is, charismatic, and really help us see the incredible value they bring to families and communities. Everybody does, but I think just to be equitable in many ways, I think they've been underappreciated in the system and not a part of it until the past few years, and it's worked out really well. So I'm going to stop there. I don't think the next slide is just other states, which you'll all see when we put the PowerPoint in the slide, just because governors like to see what's happening in other states. We put this in here. But now I think we're ready for question and answer. Elena, Deb, Jill, Kristen, anything I missed that you think is important before questions and answers? Okay.
Okay, so I think Vanessa has turned on the Q&A function. So I'm sure that there are questions. Please put them into that Q&A.
I'm sure there are.
Yes, so if you have questions, please put them into the Q&A now. As people start submitting their questions, we'd love it if you looked through what has already been submitted and upvote the ones that you think are important, the things that you also want to know. And if you have a question that was similar to one that was already asked, please just leave a comment under that question with the specifics of what you would like to know. Please remember to use the Q&A for the questions and just keep the chat for the community back and forth. Questions that are submitted to the chat might not get answered live, so please keep that in mind. Thank you.
Okay, so first question is, what might this look like for a community who currently has most part-time, part-day public school preschool? How do you anticipate public schools will need, or do you anticipate public schools will need more space in their schools, or will these slots be outside of public schools?
That will really depend, Meryl, on the community. I know, like in some communities in Eastern Connecticut, it's mostly public schools, and because of space, it's part day. There will be funding for facility, and there will be a chance for private programs to bid on the spaces. So it will be dependent on what's available in that community, and that community plan, like that community plan may say, we need 3 years to build out this. So we want this many spaces this year, this many spaces the next, and then when the new classrooms open, we want an additional 80 spaces, or we need, so that's part of the beauty of having some of the planning time, but the time goes fast, and the kids need it now. So in those communities, there'll be funding for, let's say there's only public school. I'm thinking of a particular town where this is true, only there's really just the public schools, where they would get additional funding for staffing. The price per slot will go up very significantly, allowing the schools to hire additional staff. And just as an example, Elaine and I've met with the superintendents 2 times. And on one of the calls, 2 of the superintendents said, oh, you know what? There's a business, there's an empty office building right here, right between our 2 towns. Maybe we could refurbish those and run a joint program there, or support a nonprofit to open a program there, and we could send our special education teachers there 3 mornings a week or something. So that's where community planning comes in, that the community will say, oh, there's this much money. How can we meet those kids' needs? And in places where there are private programs, it's simpler. But in places like you're talking about, some of the much more rural parts of the state where there's just part day, part week preschool, because there's only so much space in the schools, they'll be needing to look for either partners with nonprofits or expanding their public schools. But the payment per space will be significantly increased. Because I'm thinking of one that's upset about what the payment level is now, but it'll be 60% higher when this rolls out. And so they can think of other options.
Okay, there's a question here. Will private centers that provide preschool and accept care for kids be included in this funding?
Absolutely. I'm glad someone asked that question, because the care for kids piece gets complicated, and this is where Kristen comes in if I need correcting, Kristen. Right now, some of you on the call run state-funded centers and some don't. But because of the rates have always been where they are, the system was designed in the 90s that for a space, you could collect the state-funded tuition plus care for kids plus a parent fee, and that was how you would get to the full cost of care. But as it's turned out, only about 20% of families in any program qualify for care for kids. And so it hasn't worked out, right? You haven't gotten to the full cost of care. But in some ways, for that child, they're being paid twice. They're being paid the state plus care for kids. This funding, when it kicks off in 28, programs won't be able to sort of double bill, if you will. It'll just be the state-funded tuition. And then because it's paying for school day, school year, the care for kids can be the wraparound, or parent tuition could be the wraparound, if the parent doesn't qualify. So it's sort of like these pieces that are being put together. If it was a full day, we'll also still have full day spaces. If it's a full day space, it would be paid as a full day space. And then, the care for kids would not come in, that because if the state funding is covering a full day space, there's no care for kids. But if the state funding is covering a school day space for that program, then care for kids can cover wraparound, summer, all that. So the child may still access care for kids. And, as I keep saying, we're learning as we're going. We're putting this together for launch in 2028. But there's about $79 million in care for kids that we believe will be freed up for infant toddler care and wraparound care, because right now it's paying for, if you cost out care for kids dollars that are covering school day, school year, preschool right now, it's $79 million. So those dollars are freed up either for additional families, for rates, or for wraparound, summer, and infant toddler. Did I say that okay, Kristen? Is there anything? Okay.
You did fabulous. Yeah.
Okay. There are a bunch of people asking, where does Head Start fall in this plan?
I can kick that one off.
Okay, Elena.
Beth. So we consider Head Start
I'll
part
be
of
right
our.
back. Okay, Lena, you got this question?
Yeah, no worries. So we consider Head Start part of our early childhood system, right? Even though federally funded, provide extremely important and critical services for children and families across our state. And so I think part of, and maybe we can highlight this, right, as we go through some of our talking points in our slides, is, we really want to make sure that the federal funding is being leveraged, right, within our early care and education system and early childhood system. And so, as Head Start, right, as part of a local community, those services, needs, and supports should come out in the local needs assessment, right, and the planning that the community is doing in partnership with Head Start and the public schools and private providers and family child care and families, et cetera, right? So all of those pieces should be coming together. We also know Head Start does their own, right, community assessment as part of their federal Head Start grant. So there is great kind of information that can be shared and used to combine with what will be needed at the local level for the local community assessment. So we can do some more thinking, and I know that we'll be engaging the Head Start community more when it comes to the details of exactly how to make sure that the Head Start federal dollars are secured, right, and supported throughout this process, and that the integration of state funding and federal funding comes together in a way that works for both providers and the children and families that have Head Start access.
Okay, so we have a ton of questions coming in here. So I'm going to try and see if I can ask our panelists if you can be as brief as possible in your answer. That would be great, because there are literally tons of questions here. Okay, so I think that there are quite a few private providers who are worried that, okay, all my preschoolers are going to run off to the public schools for free preschool. Are we, as a private preschool currently not receiving any state funding, able to get anything out of this? And how's that going to work?
Sure. So we definitely see providers who are part of our current state-funded system and those who are interested in becoming part of our state-funded system to have an opportunity for this expansion. And so one of our principles, our guiding principles, is to make sure that this is accessible for the different settings in which children and families want to access care. So that includes private providers, community-based organizations, family child care, and the school system. So everyone having access to that. So as we laid out in the slides, right, the expansion would really be happening starting in the year like July of 2027, for example. So that date probably sounds familiar to some of you who are really closely following the early start timeline, because that aligns, right, with the larger request for proposals that we have scheduled, right, for 2027. So the idea is that there would be a request for proposals issued out that any childcare provider can apply for, right, to become a part of our state-funded system. The RFP will be based upon the community needs assessment, right? And what local communities are telling us at the OEC about the needs and wants of your families and your providers at the local level. So the idea is that this is open and accessible to all providers who are interested in becoming a part of the system and have a chance to apply to do so. Sorry, Meryl, there's just so much to say with every question.
All
I'll
right.
try to be shorter.
All right, I'm just trying to figure out here with so many questions, which ones to prioritize. Okay, could you speak some more about how funding will be combined to ensure that childcare can work for full time for parents who need it during, if schools are offering school day, school year, then how is there the capacity for those children who need care during the summertime as well?
Yeah, I'll start. I'm back. So OEC is not like stepping back from the full day, full year spaces that we currently offer. We know that full day spaces matter. What the trust funds, it expands the number of spaces with additional funding that funds school day, school year. Now, it will really depend on a community needs assessment and the community plan, what's funded in the RFP. So, that's where asking parents what they need and doing those community surveys will impact the kind of programs that are funded in that community. So, this is where I said it's complex to try to meet 160 towns early childhood needs of families with 3 and 4-year-olds. But that community plan is what's going to drive, the funding of the application for those communities.
There's a question about will Smart Start for Recovery continue next year?
So that's a good question. That people that saw the budget saw that in year 2, Smart Start has an additional amount of $3 million for additional Smart Start spaces, but in the first year of the 2-year budget, there's no Smart Start funding and no Smart Start for Recovery funding. So that was never in our budget, so it doesn't look like a cut. But Elena and I are working with OPM and the Office of the Governor on ways to make sure those spaces are not cut. So we're working on that. Additional money wasn't put in the operating budget for this year because of the tight budget. There's money for next year. So we know we have a 1-year
to fill
gap to close, and we're working on that. And as soon as we have a plan, we'll get word out. And I know, Elena, you have to step out soon. I just want to say to people you're not being rude. You have another meeting with the governor's team that time.
Okay. Question, will Care for Kids still be part of the funding equation? Infant toddler rates still don't cover expenses without this, and many parents won't continue to use the program.
This is a really important question, I think, as we work to build a system, and it is a gap. It's an area that is not resolved yet. The Care for Kids infant toddler rates are what they are. The trust fund does not fund infant toddler Care for Kids rates. It's focused on the state-funded system and funding state-funded spaces through an RFP process. So they're almost like state grants to programs. Care for Kids is a federal program with its own federal rules and its own rates, et cetera. So as we work to build a system, we've got to look to fix that. It's complicated in Connecticut because those rates are negotiated with a union. So, we don't just set those rates, we negotiate those rates. So those rates will be negotiated this year. So before 2028, we'll have a sense of what the infant toddler rates are for Care for Kids. I'll say the other thing that's happening, and it's really in a pilot phase, is our CCDF team, which is a Child Care Development Fund team, is working to turn some Care for Kids spaces into contracted spaces that would match and be more like state-funded spaces. And we're piloting that. I don't know, Kristen, 1 or 2 places, or Jill's on the line. I think you two are working on that. Do you know what the status of that is for timing?
We are actually meeting today to discuss the rollout of the first pilot.
Okay.
And we've discussed it, but we're now starting to get into the nitty-gritty.
And so we do think the contracted spaces are a way we can build a more cohesive system versus, the subsidy and the state-funded system. And obviously, they're still going to work together because in some cases that will be paying for summer and after-school care within state-funded spaces as well.
So there's a question about private programs that aren't currently state funded
Mhm.
who will want to apply when there's the opportunity. Will they need to be NIAC accredited?
There will certainly be points for NIAC accreditation, and I think OEC's been really clear with its signaling from the way we did funding during COVID to RFA-A, RFA-B, that meeting a quality standard is important for funding.
Okay. Let's see. Trying to look at questions that I think we've already answered. How will the plan account for the instability of grants from the federal level? And, our little scare last week of the federal
Here's what I would
government.
say. Anybody who thinks they can predict what's going to happen in the next 12 hours, never mind the next 24 months, could be a rich person. It is so unstable right now. And so I think the trust fund is part of why it's an exciting development is it's state dollars and it's a reliable funding stream because who knows? There seems to be a determination to have government not work. So, we believe that making government work can help families, and that's what we try to do. We're not perfect, but the federal funding we try to get out to families to help families get to work and help kids get high quality childcare. But who knows?
Okay. In the old days, public school or school readiness programs received their funding through a grant to the school district and served families in that town.
Mm-hmm.
There are lots of families who commute across town lines who might find it easier to drop their child off near where they work. How does that work in this new?
Yes, this is, if you think about the way we're doing, there's so many changes from that model. First of all, and I know, we're paying upfront and quarterly. And this year it's had to unfortunately still go through the cities and towns. So in some cities, there were still huge delays. Even if we got all the money to the city on time, they did not get the money out to the programs. But starting next year, the payments go directly to programs. I know Kim is on the line. I just want her to confirm that, that OEC will pay programs directly upfront and quarterly. Kim was on here, right?
She's on, Beth, but I don't think she's a panelist, so she might. Yep, she just put
okay.
that. Yes, that's true.
Okay. It'd be great if Kim could be a panelist, especially with Elena dropped off because she works closely with Elena.
On it.
Thank you. But so that is an improvement for the most part to be able to pay upfront and quarterly and then reconcile really at the third quarter. And so we're hoping that will help. So that's really different. The towns won't be paying you. OEC will be paying you. And also, the idea is that it used to be the mayor and the superintendent were always the chair, and they sort of controlled the council. And a couple of years ago, we changed it that's not the case. The chairs are elected by the council. And now as we shift to local governing partners, we'll be trying to build highly functional governance structures that also, for example, don't meet at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday morning when no parents can come, that we work on practices that really bring parent voices to the table. And that we have councils that are able to do the plan and the assessment with equitable input from across a community. And some towns don't like that. I'm already hearing from them. The ones that have everything wrapped up and the same providers are getting everyone's getting the exact same thing, and new programs want to get in. New programs will have a chance to apply to get in for some of the new spaces, and existing providers will continue to get, points on an RFP for being existing providers that are meeting all the requirements. But this makes room for new providers, and we think that's good.
So with the early start RFA for infant toddler care, we allowed family child care providers in, but they needed to go through an intermediary. There weren't very many of those.
Right.
There a plan to make it more
Yes, there's
possible?
a plan to make it easier for programs to apply on their own, correct? I mean, I'll look to Kim, but isn't that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Commissioner.
Can you just give a little detail for family child care applying?
Yes, of course. So any family childcare that wants to apply, once we release RFA-B for Early Start Connecticut providers, they can apply directly through the application process. They won't have to go through an intermediary.
Thanks, Kim.
Okay.
Any input as I know Meryl's sorting through the questions. I mean, I think a lot of this comes down to core values and a vision. Is there any other input on our guiding principles or something that's missing? And Kristen, maybe you could just put those up for a sec, that slide. You know, that we feel like we're going to go through a legislative session. The House is going to have a plan. The Senate's going to have a plan. We're going to lean on guiding principles. And I sort of feel like the field has never let us down. And it's part of why we have a good blue ribbon panel plan. We don't have all the answers and we can't think of everything. So, you know, as you look at our guiding principles, you know, you don't have to do it now, but just be thinking about, this is fine, Kristen, don't worry, you don't have to run the show. Just be thinking about, is something missing here? Because these are what's going to guide us as we're doing negotiations and, you know, what do we make sure we hold on to? Okay, well, there may be other questions, Meryl, but people can think about, and you know, it might even be, Meryl, that you have like a subgroup that looks at these and says, we want to, you know, we think this is missing or that is missing.
Yeah. There are there are 51 questions now. So I think we're going to have to, given that we're now at 11 o'clock, we will need to, I'm just trying to see if there are a few of these that we can.
Yeah, if there's a theme. There are a lot of questions and we're still, you know, they really help us.
Will the concept of priority school districts end with this rollout we used to have with
Well, I mean, priority school districts haven't really been a thing for many years. They were still in the statute, et cetera. But, you know, until the fund gets to a place where it can fund every single community, the highest need communities and the highest desert score communities will be the first to get expansion dollars. You know, we will be, but that's more formula driven. We could literally look at, you know, communities and their preschool access and their income and their childcare desert scores, and we'll be assigning spaces that way to start. And then over time, as the fund grows to $1 billion, $2 billion, it just throws off more funding.
Okay.
Meryl, did you see there were two things in the chat. Alex, when we were talking about the guiding principles, Alex asked if we can add infrastructure and support to those guiding principles. I'm assuming that's what that was, Alex. And then Eileen Costello from Danbury wants to know about the LECC questions. Eileen, I'm not sure where those questions are located, but if you can type it into the chat, that would be helpful.
Okay, the first one of those, Vanessa, what was that first one of those questions?
So Alex said for the guiding principles discussion, she suggested adding infrastructure and support to the guiding
Yeah,
principles.
that's a good point. Yeah, that actually is a missing piece that we should add, that we have to assure funding for infrastructure to support expansion. And so that, I think that is a missing piece. That's a good one.
So
Okay.
Anne's asking, what are the educational qualifications going to be for home providers and center-based teachers?
What? Right.
And then will there be pay parity with public school teachers?
Parity of pay will require parity of degrees. You know, that what's going to happen is we're going to say we're going to pay you at the rate to pay teachers at this level, and we'll have a salary scale within which people that accept the funds will agree to pay teachers at those rates. And there'll be, you know, a BA, an AA, CDA rates. So the idea is that, yes, there will be teacher qualifications if you're being paid at a level that goes with that. I know that there's work right now going on. I don't know if Deb Fliss is on, but on the policies related to the teacher credentials for family child care. And the progress that has to be made. I know there's like certain degrees by 2035 and CDA, AA, BA. So there are credentials required. Oh, Deb is on. Okay. Deb, do you want to just speak to that work that's going on with the family child care credentials?
Good
Thank
morning,
you.
everybody. I had to get bumped in as a panelist, so that was the delay. I wasn't not listening to the words. So the legislation to adjust QSM qualifications was passed last year. We issued interim guidance, which is on our website right now, that essentially says to everyone, continue on that path toward degrees, continue to access scholarship. And it's clear that folks have been doing that because scholarship utilization is happening at a very rapid rate. We are working on the actual general policy that will be the update to the general policy A01 that's currently on the OEC website. The existing general policy will sunset on June 30, 2025, and the new general policy will go into effect on 7/1/25. But that new policy will be posted very soon for folks. We will also post an FAQ that will help people unpack all the details because we recognize that that is very complex. The legislation is complex. And people are always helped by the chart that appears in the general policy, and we have updated and adapted that chart so that people can find where they are right now in their current qualifications and see what they need to do if they want to advance their qualifications. So
You see why I needed Deb's list, everybody? Thank you, Deb.
Okay, so
can I just add on, because there was a question that came in while Deb was speaking about elementary teachers and certifications. So some of you may or may not know, but the requirements for public school teachers are changing. I don't know if it changed this year or if it starts next. I think it starts next September. That it's now pre-K to 6 counts for teaching preschool and public schools. So OEC is part of that, right? Deb, we have a staff member serving on that. So that will surely have an impact on our requirements related to elementary education. We will align with the public schools. So that's forthcoming. It's certainly be in place before the launch in 2028. So as programs apply to the RFP, they'll know. You get points if you're accredited. You get points if you're have 75% of your teachers meeting QSM, whatever it is, those will be the priorities in the RFP. So teacher credentials do matter and accreditation does matter. But programs have a couple of years to work toward those as we work toward that RFP and for 2028, say fiscal year 2028.
So when the governor announced this, he said that it would be free for families under $100,000 in income. Programs currently rely on those parent fees as well as the.
Yep.
So how is that going to work?
We built that into the rate. We basically took the average parent payment across state-funded programs and built that into the rate that we will pay. So basically, the state will fill that in with the rate.
And so for families who are above 100,000 but below 150, it's capped at $20 per day.
Yes. And that basically programs would collect that, and that, but that the idea now is that their payment would be reduced by that amount. So, we'll add up to the same amount. But if a parent's in that gap, then we would pay that much less. So taking the parent co-payment into account to get to the full tuition.
So state-funded programs have been required to have at least a percentage of their families below a percentage, but there have been some families who are higher income. So if you had a family who was over 150,000,
they would pay full tuition.
Full tuition. So in a school readiness program, that was still a sliding scale, wasn't it?
Well, it was, but I happen to have a son who my granddaughter's enrolled in a state-funded program, and it doesn't take that long to be paying full fare.
Okay.
I don't think they make 150 and they're pretty much paying full fare. So we're going to learn too. And we're open to your feedback here because we've heard from people, 150 still really hard to afford preschool in Connecticut with the cost of housing and this and that. And we've also heard that I just forgot my train of thought. But anyway, that if you have a family with 5 kids and you make 150, that's different than if you make 150 and you have 1 kid. So we're going to have to, play with this. And then someone else asked on a call just yesterday, I think, about inflation, that 100 isn't static, that every year 100 then becomes 103, 107, whatever, depending on inflation. So we're going to have to think about that. The governor wanted it to be something that was easy to explain and that parents could understand. And we think this accomplishes that, but we're open to feedback.
About having so many questions in front of me that makes it hard to focus on one. I had a question in mind and then I looked at the other.
Somebody said the 150 doesn't get us to the 7% of income. It will align that, but I think we did some math to find that and found that it was less than the 7%. But let us, Izzy, that's a really good point. Kristen, we should run those numbers. So when we go before PROPs, they're going to ask that question. So we should figure out if it's below the guideline of 7%.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
In the chart that you showed that showed the growth in slots, it said 1,029 additional slots in, is that 2026? The next
those are the RFA B slots, correct, Kim? That we're anticipating.
Okay, so
RFA
those
A and B.
Those are not new slots. They're slots that were that are being reassigned.
They're new kids. Like basically, we got our counts by actual children. We have this many actual children enrolled in public school preschool and this many actual children enrolled in our early start classrooms now. So those are 1,000 more children who will have preschool because we've been able to do these RFAs. And we, I don't know, how many spaces did we do? Like 900 in the fall, Kim?
Yes, 900.
900, and then we're doing how many now that RFAA? We don't have the exact number, but it's at least 1,000, right? More slots.
We're
Oh
hoping
no, those
that's
are the
what we're
existing slots.
anticipating,
That's
but
all the existing slots. But then RFAB, there'll be 900 or so, or so we'll be adding spaces just by taking advantage of the dollars that are already appropriated.
Okay. What's the plan to meet the needs of children who receive special ed services? In our town, they're transported back and forth 2 times a day. Worst case scenario for children with special needs.
Exactly. Well, that's the plan will be up to the community. It's exactly whoever wrote that note, I hope is at the table and doing their community plan. There will be dollars to allow for those children to be funded as school day, school year children. Right now, the public schools claim them as part week, part day programs, when they charge the ECS. Now there's funding through early start to get those to school day, school year. And we'll be looking for community plans that hopefully do things. We've met with superintendents. We said to superintendents, are you open to partnering with a community-based program and sending staff there with some of the funding you can get from early start so the kids aren't bussed back and forth? And they were open to that. So I think, again, this is where we're going to rely on community collaboration to come up with plans that actually meet children and families' needs, not just meet the letter of the law, because it was the worst. And this person's talking about when I was director, I can just remember this young boy with autism, picked up before lunch, misses the social time, sits on a bus for 25 minutes waiting for the preschool program in the public schools to start their second session, then being bused back to us in the middle of nap, and not an easy time to re-engage. But his parents had to work. There wasn't a choice. Finally, in the second half of the year, the parents just stopped getting the child special education services because they felt it was detrimental for him to be back and forth so much. And those are the choices parents are making. So there's funding available to stop that. And either the schools can create school day, school year spaces for those kids, or they can partner with the community-based program to make it more sane. But there will be funding to help make that happen.
There's a question here about are there any plans to include access to federally subsidized nutrition, the CACF-CP?
That's a really good point, especially with new programs applying and coming in.
Some
So
states have required that as part of their preschool.
We're open to a conversation about that.
All right. It's a question about how will equity decisions be made? Will it continue to prioritize certain communities, particularly for facilities funding?
Well, it's sort of like when we put out requests for proposal, these are items that get points. Higher need communities, they get more points. And facilities will probably follow that same. The thing is, there's some real quirks in the system right now that we think the RFP will help take care of. Like there's some communities that have 110% of their preschool supply that are really high need communities. And there's some high need communities that only have 50% of their preschool spaces you need for the number of kids in that community. So, the data is going to help drive it. The governor was surprised to hear that certain cities had more than 100% of preschool supply. And a lot of that just had to do with Chef versus O'Neill and other things that happen in those communities. But I think I'm excited for the data to drive, the spaces, not just this is how it's, always been. And yes, Deb, you look like you're going to add something.
Can you tell? Hi.
Yeah,
I wonder, Commissioner, if you would sort of close with where you started in the beginning about describing this as expansion, because I'm watching the questions and stitching together a little bit of a narrative where people might be feeling like they're going to lose their full day, full year spaces, or that part of the system is going
Yeah.
to change. So can you just
My team told me that I should start by being clear that this is not new. This is basically rolling out what exists and expanding upon what exists. This is not a new program. I think when I end up talking about school day, school year, that's how we figured out how much money we would have to expand per spot. We did not figure it at full day, full year. But again, our current system, significant parts of I would say 2/3, at least, maybe 3/4 of our current system are full day, full year spaces that we certainly hope continue. I doubt we're going to have a town that has a really successful setup right now come to us and say, we want to totally wipe this out and do something totally different. We anticipate having providers at the table, parents at the table, but this is just, I would say, hopefully this is a new and improved and expanded version of what we do with more coaching supports for programs, with an RFP process driven by a local community needs assessment, and with significantly more funds to support the workforce and programs. So, so many of you spend time fundraising because, the current rates aren't at the cost of what it costs you to do this well. So it's the same system expanded that will depend on community planning. It was always a goal of school readiness to be that way, and it has been in some communities. But we haven't provided enough funding or consistent support to have that be successful. So it is a continuation of what we're doing, just expanding and significantly more dollars. I mean, if you look at OEC's budget, I mean, Governor Lamont just deserves so much credit. If you look at the budget for early childhood, the day he was sworn in till now, I'll figure out the percentage, but there are significantly more investments in early childhood than any governor, certainly since I've been an advocate in the early 90s, which makes me really old. So I think this is by far the biggest commitment yet, though, this idea of $300 million a year put in a fund. It does take some patience because it's not like all the money comes now, but it's patience and planning that gives you time to think about how you can expand your program and get to the table. When the superintendents asked for advice about what they should be doing now, Elena and I told them, if I were them, I'd be making sure that your team is participating as collaborative partners with local programs on your council now, so that you'll be ready as a council evolves into a local governance partner and be seen as a partner. Because in some communities, the schools just aren't seen as partners. And my advice to you would be the same. Figure out in your community who's running your local council, local early childhood collaborative, and get to the meetings and figure out what's happening and help them be ready as we have additional funding and supports to strengthen them, because that's going to be core to the system working.
This is a question that I think a lot of people are thinking about. As state-funded centers, are state-funded centers safe? Are we competing with public schools with enrollments and workforce salaries and possibly losing our credentialed staff to the schools?
I would say what's been going on the last 10 years is this system's been underfunded, and the public schools have added a lot of spaces, and we've been losing staff to public schools. I, as a teacher, preferred working in a private program. I felt like it was better, but I always received a lot less pay. Now the idea is it'll be a more level playing field where, how many teachers did I lose to public schools? I can't even count. And I said to them, well, I can't compete. But if I could have competed, they would have stayed. So the whole idea here is to make the playing field a little more level and pay at a rate where private programs can be competitive.
Yeah. I think that there are some people who kind of missed that part of this, that what this proposal does is both make it cheaper for parents,
Right.
increase rates to providers so the providers can pay their staff better, and try and grow the system so there's more care available.
Yeah, and I think, having no copay, right now parents will say, I'm going to public schools because it's free. Well, if you make less than $100,000, it's free, here. So, I believe it's more competitive. So, and I just saw Eileen's comment come in around piloting this in a few communities. I think, what we have now is a governor willing to invest in large systemic change. And I'm going to tell you my bias now, as a legislator and as commissioner, I sometimes feel like we pilot and then we never go to scale. Many, 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 many times, even on universal nurse home visiting. We did a pilot in Bridgeport, and now we're doing a pilot in Norwich. And now we got to make the case again to go to Bridgeport, to go to Hartford. We have a governor invested in systemic change. We have 2 years to plan it. So I think we just all have to agree to be to the table and plan it in a way, we're sort of piloting now, and with RFAA and RFAB, we have never RFP'd the system. So we're sort of piloting it now, and we're finding bumps, and it's not perfect. But we're going to get, 1,800 more kids in preschool who for years, those dollars have lapsed back into the general fund. It's not been easy. I give Kim and her team a lot of credit, and our grants and contracts team, and fiscal team. It's complicated, but I feel like we're testing it out now. So I think my answer to that is we just want to go full steam ahead, because even getting this ready for 2 years from now is a big lift. But that's just my 2 cents. So I think we're wrapping up. Any last things, Meryl, that?
We'll forward over the questions to you and
Okay.
Let you take a look and see if there's some things that you'd want to respond to.
Right, but I want to close by thanking you, Meryl, and the Alliance and the Child Care for Connecticut's Future and all the advocates, and in some ways COVID, all the time that helped you bond and get messaging and advocacy together. The governor, I think, heard loud and clear that this needed a significant investment. But I'll just say, so did 5 other huge policy issues and human service issues. And this is the one the governor said, this is where we're going to start. So that's because of your advocacy, and I think the case that the Blue Ribbon panel made. So just thanks for your time today too. And we want to keep the conversation open. We learned some things today, and we'll update some of the operating principles, and we'll get to your questions as we can. So really grateful for you all.
Commissioner Bai?
Yep.
There's a couple questions about ongoing and continuing feedback. So what I can do is I can put my email in the chat. So for those of you who have additional thoughts, maybe didn't want to publicly say them out loud, please send them to us so that we can consider all of the things as we're thinking about this proposal. So I'll put my contact information in the chat for.
Right, and the early childhood cabinet's coming up in 2 weeks. That's an opportunity for feedback, and I know we're meeting with some other external stakeholders this week, so we're going to keep listening. We learned our lesson well during the Blue Ribbon panel. So great to see everybody. Enjoy the snow.
Great. So please don't jump off. We've got a few more things to do for Alliance members. Jade, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, absolutely. Before closing out, I just wanted to check really quickly, Meryl, Vanessa, Mary, any announcements or additional discussion items?
I wanted to mention a few things that are coming up, a few legislative stuff coming up. This afternoon, there is a public hearing before the Children's Committee on 2 bills. One of them is a bill to create a pilot to allow family child care to grow from serving 6 children to serving 12 children with an assistant. It's called Large Family Childcare Pilot. That's House Bill 6839. And then there is another one that would require OEC to start planning to meet the big gap in infant toddler care, particularly for lower income families. And that's House Bill 6840. The deadline to sign up for that hearing was yesterday, but you could still submit written testimony. On the 20th, there will be the Appropriations Committee hearing where we talk about the OEC budget. The commissioner will testify at somewhere 10:30, 11. And that'll be broadcast on CTN, so you could watch what she says. Then in the afternoon, there will be a public hearing. That is our time to talk about anything related to the OEC budget, be it Care for Kids rates or the governor's UPK proposal or birth to 3 or anything that fits into the OEC budget. The deadline to sign up for any of these hearings is the day before. And you can do that on the legislature's website, cga.ct.gov. And you would go to the committee, and we will send out lots of updates with the links on how to sign up. But we are also expecting that there will be another set of bills heard before the Children's Committee, and that will probably be on a Thursday, either the 20th or the 27th. And that will include House Bill 5003, which would put money into the Early Childhood Fund. The governor's proposal is going to the Education Committee. And so there's a new bill there that I will get. I don't know when the hearing will be on that, but that's on this UPK proposal. It's quite possible that the UPK proposal will show up in a couple of different bills. There's also Senate Bill 6, which is right now, there's no text for it, but it talks about providing resources to support infants, toddlers, and disconnected youth. So you can talk about almost anything that would fit into that category on that bill. And then there are a whole bunch of other concept bills that haven't been assigned numbers. As soon as they have numbers and we can tell you what they're about, we'll get that out through the listserv. So Mary, did you?
Yep. So does anybody have any other updates, announcements? I know we're a really big group, but I guess you could put it in the chat.
Okay, right? So
Meryl, did you want to talk about the info sessions?
Two things before I talk about the immigration policy information sessions. I did just want to say the Alliance is a membership organization. We opened this meeting up to everybody because we knew that it was a high interest topic. But part of the way that we support doing the advocacy is through our membership dues, and it's the members of the Alliance who make the decisions about which issues we're going to take a stand on. So if your organization isn't yet a member, please consider joining. Membership dues are not that much for an organization. And Vanessa, maybe you can drop into the chat the link for folks to think about joining.
Yep.
So the next thing is, I know many folks are very nervous about the administration in Washington's immigration crackdown. We are going to do 2 sessions on this with an attorney. There'll be one that'll be on Zoom in the evening, primarily aimed at family childcare providers on the 12th of February. And then we will do an in-person one on Thursday, the 13th at ACES in Hamden. And Vanessa, is there a link to register for either of those that you could put up or put in the chat?
Yes, I've got a link that people can choose which session is the
Okay.
one that they would like to attend.
Okay. Back to Mary or yeah.
Okay, so I think probably we don't really have any announcements.
Unless
Unless
there's a member who's got.
Yeah, unless there's a member who wants to, I guess, raise their hand, Vanessa can promote them.
Yep. Or put it in the chat, either
Or,
way.
yeah.
I'm not seeing any hands
Okay.
raised right
And
now.
since we're way over time, I think that I need to throw it over to Jade to adjourn us.
Thank you, Mary. Happy to close this out. I believe that the commissioner, deputy commissioner, and OEC staff had to jump off, but we did want to give them a big thank you for joining us today, sharing more about the governor's proposal and answering questions. There were a lot of folks here today, and I think, as Meryl mentioned, if you're not or your organization is not a member of the Connecticut Early Childhood Alliance, I would just plug that you should consider joining. All Our Kin is a member. There's a lot of really great information and resources that are shared by Meryl and Vanessa, and you can always reach out to them to learn more. And lastly, we just want to thank everyone for being here with us today, and we hope to see you again.